Today, the topic is Windows 10 coming to end of life in 2025, and how do we prepare for the transition to Windows 11 from a support perspective, from a process perspective. What are the things we need to think about? How do we plan? What can we do ourselves? What may we lean on partners for? We're lucky enough today to be joined by Kirk Sinclair from Microsoft Canada, who will be leading the presentation. John Zeri from Point Alliance will be representing the Point Alliance interests, or the partner perspective, if you will. And we'll be monitoring the chat for any questions that you have. We just have a couple of slides here as intro slides for those that are not aware of who Point Alliance is. Again, we are a Toronto-based Microsoft partner with 3 competencies in modern work, security, and digital designations and app innovation in Azure. That's a mouthful. 11 competencies in the old legacy Microsoft world. So we are all things Microsoft Cloud and all in on Microsoft technology. So that's a little bit about who we are. If you want more information, again, pointalliance.com/company profile. And we certainly pride ourselves on being 100% Microsoft certified with all of our staff members. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Kirk, and he can share his screen and we will dive in.
All right, let's kick off PowerPoint Live. So big thank you to Jonathan and John from the team here. So really excited to talk to everyone about Enda support. So quick background on me. So as a partner development manager at Microsoft, I work across the Canadian ecosystem with key resellers to help support them in their endeavors. So Point Alliance being a very material partner in the CSP, or our subscription business, that ties in incredibly well to help the channel make sure that you, the customers, understand kind of what's going on and how we can help you. So let's get into the deck here. So first off, as Jonathan already mentioned, Enda support is coming next year. So on October 14th, 2025, that means that there will be no more feature updates, no more security updates for Windows 10. And so what we want to do, as a member of the team that derives Windows awareness, we want to make sure you, the customers, if you're running your business, you understand the potential risks and then the paths outside of that. And then we'll also touch briefly on kind of the upsides around new technology, either with Windows 11 or a new type of device that Microsoft has developed. So we're really excited about that. We want to make sure that we drive some urgency to you, the customers, around end of support. So end of support isn't just, hey, I have to get it onto a new operating system because it's supported. It's actually more around the lift or impact of moving to Windows 11. Windows 11 will add more value to your business, to your users, and there's a couple reasons why. The first one is security. So if you had seen one of these talks before, and John and Jonathan have probably heard me say this a lot, a couple of years ago, Microsoft said Windows 10 is our last operating system. And that was because we felt that we could build on Windows 10 in a material way and maintain the life cycle of it. But then COVID hit, the world went into pandemic shutdown, and there was a really differentiated requirement around our users. They were no longer within the 4 walls of IT to manage. So that required a different approach. And it really didn't matter how secure our operating system layer was, because attacks were then going at the hardware layer. So we had to make sure that the BIOS was secure, the hardware level was encrypted. So when you see the required specifications on Windows 11, one of the required tick boxes is something called TPM 2.0, or Trusted Platform Module 2.0. So that is hardware level encryption on the board of the device. So your Windows 10 device may already have it, in which case it's eligible for the free upgrade to move from Windows 10 to Windows 11, or it may not, or that TPM chip may need a firmware upgrade to make you eligible for it. But that is hands down the biggest piece. The other big requirement that we're finding a lot of customers have is the generation of the processor. So typically Intel Gen 8 and newer is eligible to move to Windows 11, but legacy stuff older than that is not. So those are really the two binding pieces, and that's really foundationally built on security. So as you can see from a stats from a TechEye survey, a TechEye study, they actually found that there was a 58% reduction in security incidents when customers moved from Windows 10 to Windows 11. And that's all about reducing firmware attacks. Now, what's nice too is you actually get better productivity on Windows 11. So the IT team can actually manage Windows 11 devices a little bit better. They understand that because there's a better hardware security stance, there's more security, let's call them dip switches enabled. So it's a better experience. And then all of that, because it's a up-to-date modern operating system, it's actually easier for IT to manage, and it allows them to potentially solve a lot of, kind of IT flow solutions a lot faster, about a 25% reduction in the deployment of a device. There's an amazing technology, and if it's something you're interested in, you haven't deployed within your environment, talk to the Point Alliance team. There's a solution called Windows Autopilot. And so Windows Autopilot has the capability for you to deploy a device for the first time the user logs in. They're the one that opens the tape on a brand new device that's shipped from the Point Alliance warehouse to your user. They log in and all of their required operating system, all the security credentials, everything loads directly onto the device streamed from the cloud. So that's Windows Autopilot. So that's another capability that we have that allows you to leverage Intune, so your cloud MDM, to go and deploy a device remotely. Saves a bunch of time if you're working with remote employees, if you have a lot of devices, and it gets rid of old school imaging. So that's the really exciting piece of going to a more modern operating system, making sure that you've got the capabilities built in. So that's the future that we want to get to. Now, the current world also is changing dramatically. So a lot of our devices are actually more significantly older than we would expect. We had a very significant load in of devices during the pandemic. I jokingly say to a lot of partners like the Point Alliance team, they were selling anything that wasn't nailed down. So if that device would work, we were selling it to an end customer because they were going home for, what at the time was an unknown amount of time. Those devices are now quite aged, and they may not meet that hardware requirement that we mentioned around the CPU or the TPM. And the other piece is even if it still meets that requirement, you're looking at a device that's 4 or 5 years old, at which point hardware might be below the curve of performance. The battery life on that notebook may be dead. It's out of warranty. So you've got a potential, refresh required around that device anyway. Obviously, end of support is another big trigger. And then there's a lot of noise, a lot of excitement around AI. And so I'm sure a lot of you customers are looking at AI, inspecting it, trying to understand how you're going to get a hold of that. We're not going to touch too much on AI in this presentation, but Point Alliance is really a thought leader as a reseller in the channel around adopting an AI practice. I've actually learned a whole lot from John. So I would encourage you to go and make sure that you leverage that. And then security, I just mentioned the reasons around security and why that's so important. So security becomes the number one reason to go and drive this. Now, your journey when you start to think about Windows migration, unfortunately, you don't just snap your fingers and it happens. What Microsoft has found is typically customers take about 14 months, mid-sized customers, about 14 months to move from Windows 10 to Windows 11. Now, if you're doing the napkin math in there, we've only got about 11 months left. So we're kind of behind the curve. So we need to start right away within your business. The very first step is a technical assessment, and that's what we call milestone 1. And that's where you go and make sure you understand what devices, what inventory you have in your environment, and what devices need to go and get addressed. There's other options that you can go and we'll touch on that in just a second. Why this is so important? Well, we learned some things, Microsoft learned some things in the Windows 7 to Windows 10 migration. There was no hardware requirement in the same functionality, same kind of, let's call it speed bump as a TPM chip or the CPU chip from 7 to 10. So, but we still saw customers waited very long, right until the last minute before they went and refreshed their devices. And so we have some concerns around supply chain. It may be that devices might not be readily available depending on what type of device you're looking for, not unlike COVID. Again, if you went through device procurement in COVID, you probably were running around trying to find anything you could outside your typical vendors. Maybe you're a Lenovo house or you prefer HP, and then you had to go and find some other device. So what we may see is a little bit more supply constraint as we get closer to October 2025. If supply goes down, what happens to price and procurement? Costs go up. So that's the other potential motivating factor if you're talking to your business decision maker around how you want to make sure that they go and land this. So thoughts around that, definitely make sure that you're accelerating that. Now, I mentioned we'll briefly touch on AI, and this is some really exciting technology. So Microsoft uses the term Copilot for our AI branded solutions. So you'll see Copilot in Windows, Copilot in Microsoft 365, Copilot in Azure. We also announced a device branded with Copilot, specifically Copilot plus PC. So this is really exciting where we now have AI enabled Windows PCs. And so the ambition here is to make sure that we've got the most advanced devices for you, the customers, that are going to drive maximum value for you and really differentiate the product. What you're going to get out of it right now, if you go and look at the Copilot Plus PCs in market, amazing battery life around them. You've got an NPU, and we'll explain what an NPU is in just a second. And it's really performance on the right workload. What's driving this is a hardware solution called an NPU, or neural processing unit. So if you're a little bit of a PC geek or nerd or whatever you want to call it, you're used to your spec line on your computer. So you've got a processor, you've got your RAM, you've got your storage, and if you're a gamer or you're into CAD or whatnot workloads, you typically have a solution that is a graphics card. Now, within the devices, we have this neural processing unit. So this is another processing piece. What's exciting about this is a high efficiency processor that will take AI specific workloads and run them more effectively than your GPU or CPU. So in this case, in the demo that we're showing, this is facial recognition. So we've tasked the AI, that AI processor locally on the device, to go and recognize faces. So it's processing through. So it's running through that workload significantly faster than your GPU or CPU. And the other thing it's doing is it's actually running it much more efficiently than your GPU or CPU can. So your battery life on the GPU or CPU is absolutely getting drained as you take those bigger engines or the bigger processing pieces and you're pointing them at this workload. So less battery life. So that's how Microsoft can make this commitment around an NPU being more efficient. The future state of this is this NPU hardware is incredibly exciting for the developers, ISVs around the world, because they have the opportunity. If they have AI workloads within their software, they can then write to a device, as long as they know that it's Copilot plus PC enabled, they can write to that NPU and use local AI processing. Right now, the majority of your AI processing actually occurs in the cloud. And so you've got a back and forth. So potentially with back and forth, you might have latency. There might be security concerns depending on the network that you're attached to. So this is really compelling where you may have local AI, and we've got the hardware available for that. So what that looks like in the device lineup as you start to think about the devices in the environment is we actually kind of have 3 Windows 11 Pro PCs now in market. You've got a great experience with the Windows 11 PC. So you still have the potential to run AI on that. So you've got Copilot locally, maybe it's processed in the cloud with no NPU. So broadly available, these are still the commercial devices you've got in there. Great high-end processors from all our silicon partners like AMD, Intel, or Qualcomm. There's then kind of this middle ground called an AI PC. And so the AI PCs will have an NPU enabled in there. And what you see is that NPU is a kind of a lesser processing power than the device requirements to be branded a Copilot plus PC. So an AI PC will still have an NPU. It'll run about 10 tops, so trillions of operations per second. And so that's the kind of the speed test that you've got with an NPU. So when it processes, it's taking all those small workloads as an AI processor, trillions of operations per second, something that your CPU or your GPU can't necessarily keep up on. So that's the big piece is look for these devices. It doesn't mean that everyone necessarily is going to immediately go to the right and start buying Windows 11 Copilot Plus PCs. But depending on the workload or the user, if you've got an ISV that is using specific software that says, hey, I can use an NPU, local processing, you've got that capability. If you are refreshing devices for your existing staff and they're kind of the traditional information worker, you can absolutely go to the left and get great modern devices, thin, sleek notebooks that are still running Windows 11 Pro. So that's kind of the landscape of the future of what devices can be. All of this creates a really interesting intersection for the Microsoft AI technology stack. So your users are typically looking for AI. They want AI built into their work daily life. They want to make sure that it's going to make their lives a little bit easier, enable it in meetings or chats or writing emails, summaries, allow them to manage the volume of work that they have. And then we know Microsoft's AI solution, Copilot for Microsoft 365, will actually allow your users to be more productive. And if you're interested in exploring Copilot for Microsoft 365, again, I'd urge you to have a conversation with the Point Alliance team, as they are kind of leading the tip of the spear on the adoption of that. But all this converges into modern devices in the ecosystem, up-to-date operating system, and then your best modern silicon. But before we get there, we want to make sure that you're still updating your devices. So we mentioned a readiness assessment earlier around how do I find the devices in my current ecosystem that are Windows 10 that will never move to Windows 11. And the first step of that, so this is milestone one. The very first piece is you need to go through your environment and understand what devices are there. So you need to have an inventory report. There's kind of 4 flavors that you can go through this. So if you've got Intune enabled, so Intune is running within your environment as your mobile device management, there's a couple tools in there. So you can run the Windows Update for Business Readiness report. That'll output, and it'll show you the capabilities of the device. It will tell you the reason why that device may not move from Windows 10 to Windows 11. Very similar experience from the Endpoint Analytics Work from Anywhere report, also in Intune. And then if you're still running Configuration Manager, SCCM, you have the capability to run a hardware inventory enablement. Now, if you don't necessarily have any of that, or you're working with a managed service provider, there is actually a hardware script that can be run through your RMM, like ConnectWise, and that will still pull out the device configurations and allow you to look for the devices there. I would strongly urge you to do this, write this one down as a follow-up practice within your environment, find the devices that are ineligible, because this is the list of devices that you need to start working on. Most customers have a refresh process where maybe they're refreshing based on the age of the device or the department, but instead we need to focus on what the devices are and where they are. If you have questions around this, this is why we have channel partners. This is where Point Alliance can come in, look at your environment, and give you a process or practice to help you navigate through this. Now, lifecycle management, if you've already had Windows in your environment and you're used to migrating from the various versions of Windows 10, you can actually see Windows 11 is still in there. So some versions of Windows 11 actually are also reaching into support, so you still need to go through an update. What's nice about Windows 10 prior to Windows 7 is this becomes an ongoing management process as opposed to a project. If some of you folks have been around from Windows 7, you may remember the big Service Pack 2 upgrades. So Service Packs became these big kind of material projects that the IT department had to lean in on. But now updates are smaller. They can run in line and a little bit easier for your IT teams to go and land and process. Now, there are other alternatives that you can do to support this beyond just doing the full migration. So update your devices, right? That's easy. Windows 365 will give you the capability to protect those devices, selling new devices, obviously. And then there's a solution called extended security updates on those devices that will never move. So extended security updates. They have an additional cost, about $61 US per year per device. That almost does double in year 2, and then it doubles again in year 3. So with ESU, however, you have to be on Windows 10 22H2 update. You're only getting security updates, and there's no new functionality or features, and it really kind of limits your capabilities there, and you're stuck to a 1-year subscription. So if you're doing that, you also want to consider the devices in the environment. They might be pretty old, and that user probably is having productivity issues, and it's, just a bad user experience. So it might be time to refresh it and review at any rate. Often when we discuss this, customers will come up and say, hey, but I've got a device that's running a big piece of machinery. CNC, for instance, someone's running some machinery, then absolutely ESU might be the piece. Some folks are still running Windows 7. I would encourage them to air gap that device. So if you still have Windows 7 in your environment because it's running a $400,000 machine, unplug it, put it in a closet somewhere, blow it out with an air fan every couple months to make sure it's still running, but then start to figure out how you're going to move that device. So just be aware. I understand that might be a consideration, but for your IT workflow, you absolutely can get going on that. So transitioning to Windows 11. We talked about getting ready. Run the readiness apps, understand what features potentially you're going to get, and then talk to your users, make sure they understand the capabilities. I was talking to one municipality, and they used the Windows communication feature within IT, within Windows 11, and they flagged to their users that they were moving everyone to Windows 11. And there was an opportunity for the users to click, yes, I want to migrate now. And so users could opt in early. And so they started the operation. They had about a 3-month rollout. First users could opt in. Second rollout, they sent another reminder, hey, you've got eligibility on this. And then on the 3rd month, everybody got the update. So the next piece is we want to get deployed. So we understand the devices that we have. We've looked at our environment. We've hopefully have a strategy for the devices that will never move. What is our plan? What is our strategy to move existing devices that are eligible to move from Windows 10 to Windows 11? So first off, work with your IT department. You're going to pilot some solutions, and then you deploy in waves. Hardware prerequisites, we danced around this a little bit, but this is just kind of the full piece around what you're going to see. So, kind of minimal CPU requirements, 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs. Not too many folks are actually doing that in mainstream IT. TPM 2.0, as I mentioned, UEFI with Secure Boot. Again, we're looking at the BIOS and hardware layer. And that also means, though, that TPM 1.2 is not eligible. Potentially, if that TPM chip is viable, then you can upgrade that to 2.0. We're not doing 32-bit CPUs anymore. And then BIOS-only firmware, because, again, malware is now targeting that BIOS is not eligible. If you are a very small business, meaning you don't actually have any device management and you're just kind of running it yourself, there's a solution built right into Windows called PC Health App. So you can run in, check it, download it from the Microsoft Store if it's not already installed in your settings, and basically you run the installation. What it's going to get after it installs, it'll look at your device. You can click on Check Now to see whether or not your device is eligible for Windows 11. And you'll get a green check mark if you're good to go and you want to kick it off. A yellow means there's potentially some action, and then X means it does not meet the requirements. So this is if you're going to update device to device. So typically only for our very small, customers, but absolutely there is a path to do that. And then obviously upgrade the hardware that you've got, and then replace the devices that are ineligible. So with endpoint analytics, this is the output that you're going to see if you run that assessment. If you're going to run it for Windows Windows Update for Business, you're going to see the same experience. It'll give you a scoring on some of these solutions out of Intune. And then Config Manager will still give you a list that you can output. And again, simplified path around what you're going to run through there in terms of taking action on those eligible devices. So upgrade the existing hardware if you need to meet that requirement or can meet that requirement, or devices that are ineligible, you're going to have to go and replace them. A big piece that typically comes up whenever we're talking to customers is app compatibility. So what I first want to address is Windows 11 it kind of sounds like we addressed a lot of things primarily at security to address that hardware layer encryption. So that's absolutely the case. Windows 11 was designed in for compatibility. It's actually running the same kernel as Windows 10. So we know there's a lot of built-in compatibility through that. But what's great is Microsoft actually built a further support program to assist our customers with their migration. And so what you can do is built into the tool. So if you're running Microsoft Intune, you can run an inventory on the applications on your devices as well. So you create that app inventory, not unlike the device inventory, and you can go through and classify those applications to determine what's critical, what's important, and what's a nice to have. It's really important to go through this process so you understand what line of business apps potentially are going to be impacted by some of the steps of potentially moving to Windows 11. What's great is, though, Microsoft, through our app compatibility solution, has found that we're about 99.7% compatible. So that's incredibly impressive, and it gets better. So Microsoft has a solution called App Assure, and you can log into App Assure through Fast Track in your M365 tenant portal. And what you can do is engage Microsoft directly to support your app compatibility. So if you're moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11, you having app compatibility, you can reach out to Microsoft through this, and they can leverage and support you migrating that application to Windows 11. What's even better about this is there's actually no cost. So App Assure, we've helped over 800,000 applications. That's how we're maintaining that over 99% app compatibility, 90 million solutions unblocked. Over 40 million, help desk calls prevented. So your users aren't calling you. Instead, you've worked through it and it's done. And because we're doing this complimentary, we're saving almost $8 billion in customer savings, as opposed to paying for app migration from a third party to go and run that for you. So really exciting. So let's talk about the plan as to how we actually go through the deployment. But first off, let's use our friendly IT users. So deployment isn't something you're necessarily going to drop in all at once, right? We kind of talked about that initially. So first off, deploy with confidence. That means you can use all the tools that you currently have to deploy Windows 11. So if you're currently managing your Windows 10 environment and you're not centrally managed, you can run Windows Update and deploy them. You can use all the existing tools, SCCM, Windows Update for Business, or Windows Intune to deploy. You could also provision devices remotely. I mentioned that really cool technology called Autopilot. And so you can actually do zero-touch deployment of Windows 10 to Windows 11 with Autopilot remotely. Meaning if that device is out there, you've got a remote user, through Intune, you can deploy that user to Windows 11. They don't have to come to a tech bench. They don't have to get reimaged. Instead, you're leveraging Entra, right? So your cloud identity and Intune to deploy that. What Microsoft has seen, so from successful Windows deployments, is you want to treat Windows 11 as another update. So we mentioned the Windows 10 20H2 update. So in the same way that you've gone and deployed Windows 10 and you've done these regular updates, treat Windows 11 as the same piece. So use the same tools that you're going to do and go and deploy it. If you are migrating, looking at migrating to a cloud-based, migration or management solution, you can migrate with Windows 11 now ahead of that. And so some folks are doing that same update, but they're just using SCCM, they're deploying and on-premise, and they're good to go. So same tools that you're using, you can go and do that. The recommended approach around a deployment is to, and probably the third time I've said it, don't deploy all at once. Instead, use ring-based deployments. So identify your power users, probably within IT, deploy there. Have the users run it, make sure nothing's broken, apps are still working with there, and then you can start deploying other solutions further and further out. Again, try and use your power users, your pro users, your first adopters, and then deploy further out. When it comes to applications, critical applications absolutely need to be tested, but further down the priority list of some of your apps, you probably can push that Windows 11 deployment without concerning too much around the lower priority applications. So keep running this. And as I mentioned, Windows becomes an ongoing process, not a project for update. So you get used to the deployment, new features get added into Windows 11, you can deploy them again through the ring process for your users. We'll do a quick outline of kind of the solutions. You've still got Microsoft Configuration Manager, so your on-prem management solution, if you're still there. Windows Update for Business, you can update from the cloud. And then Windows Auto Patch, you're updating from the cloud, but you're leveraging Microsoft services. Config Manager, so on-premise, if you do have Intune in the environment, Intune directs it, but Microsoft Config Manager can go and deploy that device down to whatever they need. So again, this is a great example of using the existing tools in the environment that you have. Use your readiness reports to identify and group your devices that you want, and then you push the updates. It doesn't mean that you have to do a full wipe and replace. Instead, you can do an in-place upgrade. That means that you're spending less time updating that device. It's not, less risk of losing user data, and you're back and ready to go in faster time. Windows Update for Business and Windows Auto Patch. This is cloud-based solutions. Key differentiator here is the Auto Patch solution. We'll jump ahead one. There we go. Auto Patch solution is kind of more of a curated solution. So Microsoft has our recommended or best practices when it comes to deployment, so it can push those to you. So a little more hands-off. You're still going to go and push and schedule what your experience is around that deployment, but it's got a simplified experience that you can go and run that solution, and it'll give you in-depth reporting to understand what the status of that device is. So when to use it? If you're already using Windows Update for Business, you've got that capability. You can run feature update, and then you can expand that deployment relatively easy. Again, using that ring deployment, IT first, power users, select departments as you roll through, and then you can do automation on this. So very simple to click through and make sure you've got automation built on this. Again, these are cloud tools, and if you're not familiar with this is really where Point Alliance team can kind of jump in. If we looked at the Microsoft certs that they have, modern management, modern devices, that absolutely is one of their core skill sets. And this is really what that's all about. Managing devices security is an area that they can help you out with. Nice to have delivery optimization. So rather than everything streaming direct from the cloud, instead you can go in and run with kind of peer distributed technology. So we've how to run a migration, and then some of the tools that you can use, the existing tools. And I'll just kind of wrap it up really quickly here. How Microsoft approached Windows 11 is try and reduce resources. So make updates and deployments easier. So you're going to find that the amount of data pushed out to devices is less. You can do an in-place upgrade rather than a full wipe. Use the existing tools and practices that you have with Windows 10 and reduce the need for replication and publishing. What we can then do is even download that solution in the background. So users might still be working. You can stream to those devices and make sure they're ready to go. So big learnings that have happened. What's exciting is customer experience on the Windows 10 to Windows 11 migration has been very positive. So most organizations aren't flagging the concerns that maybe we saw from Windows 10 to Windows 11 migration. For you folks, leverage the Microsoft Aperture. There is an onboarding kit, so we've got some links we certainly can share. The IT tools that you're using, more than likely you know how to do this using your existing updates within your environment. If you don't, again, Point Alliance can certainly help you with that. But typically, that's the tool that you can go and run with it. Your users are probably already using Windows 11 at home. They're very comfortable with that. So let's get them going on that. And please do that milestone one, which is leveraging your existing inventory reports and push that. If you need help with that, again, I urge you, work with the Point Alliance team. They can walk you through onboarding, even if it's just inventory reports. If you have an initiative that you want to move to cloud management, they can support you with that, with Intune onboarding and whatnot. So big wrap up. Upgrade your PCs that you can, that are eligible, pull that report, plan for new devices. If you're in an industry that has some, dependencies on ISVs, if you're using AutoCAD, if you use Adobe, some of the bigger vendors, more than likely, they are going to have a flag where they may have a solution that will run local AI. and you would need an NPU powered device on that. So watch for that update as that. If not, Copilot Plus PCs are still a great experience because you're going to get a lot of processing power with reduced battery consumption. Consider streamlined management. If you want to enable M365 Business Premium, again, talk to the Point Alliance team around that. And what's great is all of this is really promoting security. Windows 10, migrating from Windows 10 to Windows 11 allows your device to be more secure. Modern management is a further path on that. And then you can further upgrade that. All of this sets you up incredibly well to potentially go and migrate to something like Copilot and M365 if you have ambitions for AI. But again, that's a story for another day and something that the Point Alliance team certainly can take you through. So, Jonathan,
Yeah,
that's what I've got for you. So thanks everybody for staying tuned in. Really appreciate it.
that was amazing, Kirk. I thank you so much. I know you're very busy, and appreciate you making time for us to tell us how should we plan, what's the next step, and so on. And again, as Kirk mentioned, we are here to help and to kind of help you through the process, planning whatever you need. Also, consider this as a good time for a housekeeping as well, right? If you're not using the tools that Microsoft provide, such as Intune and device management, maybe this is a great time to do that, because if you're going to get a new devices, it's easy to kind of go through autopilot and enroll the users through it. So there's lots of opportunity with this. Again, moving to Windows 11 is better and more secure device as well. So it's all good. So it's all about planning and what we do next. So as I mentioned, this recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and we will send an email after this webinar to all attendees for a short survey, and that we go from there. Again, thank you so much all. Thank you, Kirk, for making time for us. And again, keep an eye for our upcoming webinars. We run this solution for success webinars each third Tuesday of each month. So we're gonna have a new lineup for 2025. We are very serious about our Microsoft expertise, and you will see a showcase of the different products we're gonna be showing you in the coming year. Again, thank you all for being here. This was amazing, and thank you, Kirk, again.
Love it. Thanks, folks. Cheers.